Hey, we are in episode 2 of Youth Ministry with Tyshone Roland. My wife told me that last week's episode was kind of rough. I wasn't coming against anybody's sermons. I really believe that all the sermon clips are really good. But on the subject of sermon clips, because we're just going to talk about it for a second before we get started, you can post your sermon clips. I advise any new youth pastor, if you just got there and you don't even want to put your senior pastor or your church in your bio, but you're posting all your sermon clips, it's just like, it's a conflicting message. You know, you just got there. You don't even know one of your leaders' names, but you were quick to get that sermon clip out. I just think you got to really reconsider some things. I will say this, in my experience, when I became a youth pastor, the church I was at had good technology. I was at one of those churches that at any given moment, if I wanted to pull a whole bunch of content from myself, I would have it at any given moment. But I just knew when I first got there, it was more important to post my leaders than it was to post my content. So I do encourage youth pastors, listen, you can post your content, but here's a question, just a suggestion. Have you ever posted one of your leaders? Have you ever posted one of your volunteers? Have you ever posted a student? Have you ever posted your senior pastor? Have you ever posted the young adult ministry? Do you post other things outside of your ministry? I think those are important questions to ask yourself when you're a youth pastor, simply because when you have the opportunity to post a lot of content from yourself, you got to make sure that you're using that energy for good and not evil. That's all I'm trying to say. I believe in the sermon contents. Okay, Vic? Am I good? Am I good, Daniel? All right. Now, you know that I like to suggest to read books, and this is a person that I think is really easy to read. His name is Donald Miller. If you haven't heard of Donald Miller, you need to get Know Your Why. I will talk about that book probably in a few weeks, but currently, this year I have found myself having to start a lot of things. Tyshone Roland Ministries is a calling, but it's also a business. Blackwell Edwards Foundation, it's a nonprofit for families and victims that experience mass shootings like myself. It is a calling, but it's also a business. And I found myself really confused, wondering, like, how do I lead a business? How do I have a staff? How do I have an employee? Daniel Stango, I don't do my social media anymore. I don't do a lot of that stuff anymore. I hired somebody, and it's much more than just paying them every 2 weeks. It's also leading them and making sure that you're building a company, not just building a brand. And so there's a book that's really helped me, and it's Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. Now, it's like a exercise, 60 days to master leadership, sales, marketing, execution, management, personal productivity, and more. I will say that I read it like pretty fast. It's meant to be read in 60 days, but you can probably read it if you want in one sitting. It's really, really easy to read. So I want to encourage you, if you're starting a business, if you're doing anything with business, you need to get Business Made Simple. I want to talk about something that I think is really, really helpful when it comes to youth ministry. And again, I am deciding to share things at the level of urgency that I feel like I need to get out. It's not necessarily that there's practical lessons that I'm withholding in front of you. There's a lot of things that I'm excited to talk about. I'm excited to talk about building a conference. I'm excited to talk about how to raise up a leadership team. I'm excited to talk about how to grow your youth ministry. I do think there's practical things that you could actually do to grow your youth ministry. And I'm going to be giving you those things as the weeks and as the months progress. But as I'm getting out this content, I feel like I need to get out things that are just really, really helpful, because as a youth pastor, your mind and your frustrations really do matter. How you feel about your 9 to 5 is more important than how you feel about your Wednesday night. And I think a lot of youth pastors end up quitting, leaving churches, or getting very frustrated at the current churches they're at, simply because their mindset and their frustrations are on things that they shouldn't be focused on. And so I've been going back in the recesses of my brain when I was a youth pastor, and I've also been taking into consideration conversations I have with a lot of youth pastors. I try my best to talk to senior pastors. I feel like I can learn a lot from them. I love asking them questions. I love getting in their mind. It's really helpful to understand how they think on the other side. And as a traveling evangelist, I really get that benefit. I get that vantage point to actually ask them questions. But as I talk to youth pastors and senior pastors, it's kind of an interesting tension. And the second thing that I wanted to get out today is something that I think is really, really important, okay? It's having your senior pastors back. having your senior pastor's back. As a youth pastor, you're almost like the chief guy or gal that is creating a team, not just to impact young people for Christ, though that's a given, you know that. But there's a lot of churches in the city that are doing that. You're not just the only church that's doing that. You're not the only person that's called to do that. But you decided to be on that team. And when you decided to be on that team, you decided to have the vision and the values and the backs of your leaders. Now, like I said, I'm not against books. Obviously, in the beginning of every episode, I'm going to give you book recommendations. But when it comes to the principles of leadership in youth ministries, I want to pull from the principles in the Bible. And one of the things I want to pull from is a principle from the life of Noah. I'm going to read Genesis chapter 9 from verse 20 to verse 24. And it says this: Noah began to be a man of soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, because that's what happens. When you drink of the wine, you're going to get drunk. And laid uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on both of their shoulders, and took the garment and laid it on both of their shoulders, and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their fathers. Their faces turned backwards, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, it's so funny, it didn't say from his sleep, it said from his wine. Did you guys ever catch that? But y'all ain't reading y'all word, y'all ain't catching it. There's a word in there, okay? And he knew what his youngest son has done to him. And then he ended up cursing his youngest son. We're not going to talk about curse because this is meant to be encouraging, not cursing. Okay. And apparently I was mean last week, so I'm going to try to be really positive this week. So I want to read this story. I think we all heard this story. We all know where I'm getting with this. I'm getting to that word that senior pastors say every week, almost in their sermons. I was under a church that it was like every sermon was about honor. And I remember being annoyed of it. But as I've gotten older, I see that a lot of people forsake the principles of it. And I can understand why a senior pastor would talk about it in their sermons every week. Because we have a lot of youth pastors that instead of covering their pastors and showing their pastors grace, they actually uncover their pastors. And it's almost like they judge their pastor, the very person that they look up to. Now they're judging. They used to come to church with a notepad ready to learn. Now they come to church with a scoreboard ready to grade. And that's not who we're called to be. That's not what we're called to do. And I want to talk about showing your pastor grace, because that's something that I think a lot of youth pastors, I don't see them doing it enough. I'm going to tell you something that I realized a few months in when I was at Free Chapel. I had this epiphany. And I remember I just got Pastor Jensen. He upgraded his desk. And so I got his desk and I felt anointed when I got it, y'all. I'm not even going to lie. Every sermon that I had that was written on that desk was anointed. And I'm telling you, Lord Jesus, let me get that desk back in the name of Jesus. Pastor Jensen, if you're watching this, I never asked for anything. I would love the desk. Okay. I remember I was on this desk and I was writing this sermon. And as I was writing, I stopped and I just had this thought that most megachurch pastors have never probably been a part of a megachurch. Not in a bad way, but this megachurch phenomena that we see across the world, that we see across the nation, it's common to most of us now. We can look up on YouTube, we can go to churchleaders.com and you can look up multiple churches that are above 1,000 plus. You know, if you can look up multiple churches that are 5,000 plus, there's a lot of churches that are 10,000 plus. It's so common now. But if you just go back 50 years ago, this is a new thing. This is not something that we're actually used to. And so I started considering all the implications of leading something that's new. You don't have a reference point on how to do it. Let's play this game. You're like, no, Tyshone, you're wrong. Where can TD Jakes call people when it comes to how to be TD Jakes? I'll wait. Who can Stephen Furtick call when it comes to being Stephen Furtick? I'll wait. Don't call me. Who could Pastor Jensen call years ago when he was building this church in Gainesville, Georgia, while flying across the nation to Orange County? Who? It's a new thing. I remember when I recognized that, and as soon as I recognized that, I said, you know what? The fact that these pastors are doing this and they're figuring it out in real time how to do what they've never seen, I got their back and I'm going to cover them because I don't know if I could do it like this. I actually don't know if I could do something that I've never seen before. Granted, I've grown up in it now. Now my vantage point is so different. I've got to grow up in the very thing that these leaders lead. But as I was a leader under a leader that built something that's never been built before, I had to say this, Tyshone, no matter what you get frustrated about, you got to understand that you don't know what it's like to be in their shoes. So don't grade your pastor. Give your pastor grace. And the whole time I was there, I gave my pastor grace. Every pastor, I give grace because you know what? You may not be under a senior pastor with a blue check. Maybe you are under a pastor with a blue check. But whether they have a blue check or not, I guarantee you that the thing that God is specifically doing in that church with those unique set of limitations, unique set of circumstances, they don't have a reference point. What they need is a youth pastor that's not going to judge them, but they need a youth pastor that's going to cover them and get behind them and show them grace. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is because we all have had a leader, right? I want you to think of your leadership team. I don't care how big it is, whether you have hundreds on your roster or maybe you got 10. There is one of those 10 that it seems like no matter what you do, you could do better. I had one of those leaders. Everywhere I've gone, I think God gives all of us those leaders, and I don't know what to do but to love them and to pray for them and to bless them because that's the only way I know how to deal with them. But I think there's always someone on your team that's like, well, I thought you could do better. Oh, we had 157. I thought we were going to get 175, That was a good sermon. You quoted the wrong scripture, but it was good. They played the wrong note. There's always that person where you're like, are you on the team to help me or are you on the team to hurt me? Like, obviously you're showing up every week, so I know you have a heart for this, but I don't know if you have a heart for me. And because I don't know if you have a heart for me, it's hard to know where I could put you when it comes to your heart for this. And you're probably, I know exactly what that means. Imagine being a senior pastor and you're paying this guy or girl, and you're like, I know they have a heart for this, but I don't know if they have a heart for me because it seems like they don't show me grace. It just seems like they grade me all the time. Listen, I just want you to know, if you're grading your senior pastor according to your standards, they will never pass the test. They will never pass the test. You're always going to find yourself frustrated when you find yourself grading your pastor, but we're not called to grade our pastors. Can I say this? Can I set you free from being frustrated between Monday through Friday and waiting for a good worship moment on Sunday every 17 weeks to remind you of why you work at this church? Let me just tell you, stop grading your pastor when he's preaching a sermon. Don't grade your pastor according to your favorite preacher. How unfair is that? Don't grade your pastor's leadership style according to John Maxwell's book. This man is John Maxwell. Don't grade what you're doing on a week to what that church in a different nation is doing that you're seeing on YouTube. There are so many things that YouTube is not picking up on. There's so many scenes that you're missing. There's so many things that you don't know. We're not called to grade our pastors. We're not called to look and find the faults in their leadership and then walk around telling other people in the hallway, hey, I'm going to tell you what senior pastor so-and-so did. No, you're in disobedience when you do that. And not only are you in disobedience, I'm just be quite honest, you're going to make your life harder. You're going to make it harder because you're constantly finding flaws instead of making allowances for certain things that you just may not understand. And I think as youth pastors and leaders, we have a great opportunity. Usually, if you're a youth pastor, you will probably, I like to say this to somebody because the other day I was talking to a youth pastor who called me and he was like, Tyshone, I've only preached twice to my church on the weekend and I just don't feel like they utilize my gift. Like I get to do offering and announcements, but I really don't get to utilize my gift. And I heard him out. I literally heard him out. I said, you know what? I understand that. I've been there where you feel like you have more in you and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can be sharing more. And then pastor books somebody else on the weekend or a random day. And you're like, why did they book so-and-so? I feel like I got it. And then you got that demonic spirit in your leaders, because then they start walking up to you and saying, hey, you should be preaching. You know, if you don't know what I'm referencing, listen to episode number 1. I was really mean and I talked about division, and you shouldn't have division. I'll tell you this, when any of my leaders walked up to me and said, when someone else was in the preaching on the weekend, they said, Pastor Tyshone, you should be preaching. I said, you better shut up. And you better not ever say that again. I'm glad that we have Bishop so-and-so speaking. He's anointed. And maybe if you paid attention, God will be blessing you. And that's why your life is so ratchet. I just walk away. That's how you talk to your leaders? Absolutely. I just be saying stuff because, again, I'm not going to allow division to ruin the house. But I will tell you this. I've been there. I've been there where you're wondering, like, man, why am I not getting all this opportunity? And when I was on the phone with this youth pastor, I said, hey, bro, I want to pause and ask you a few questions. Before we go further in this, I love your frustration. I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to take a drink of water. I want to ask you a question. I said, how many pastors are on your staff? He gave me the number. I think the number was, I want to say it was 9. He said it was 9 people. I said, okay, real cool. I said, how many of them have preached a weekend this year? And he was like, well, I mean, 2 of them have. I said, okay, so there's 9 pastors on staff and you've preached 1 and the other 2 have preached some. So there's 6 other pastors right now, or 7 other pastors right now that haven't preached. And he was like, well, there's 2 of them that don't want to preach. I said, okay, well, now we have 5 that do want to preach, and those 5 haven't preached, and you've gotten to preach, and you gotten to preach twice, and you're telling me that you don't think your senior pastor is giving you enough opportunity. How about you stop making it about you, bro, for a second, and realize, man, I'm getting an opportunity, and let me not be mad that I'm not getting enough, because I'm not called to get the stage. I'm called to build a ministry. Hey, are you enjoying this podcast? I really enjoyed recording it. I want to also make you aware of a resource that I have just for youth pastors or youth leaders that are teaching or preaching to young people. It is a course called How to Preach to Gen Z. I took about 4 or 5 hours just to put it together for you. And if you want it, go ahead. The link is in my description. It's also in my link tree. And I pray it blesses you or maybe someone that you know. Now get back to listening to that phenomenal podcast. And hey, that's an anointed man of God, ain't he? Youth pastor and senior pastor. I have been a youth pastor, and every now and again, people bring me out to preach on their Sundays. Again, if you want to book Tyshone Roland, it's TyshoneRoland.com/booking. I'm available. If I can't make that date work, I'll make the next one work. Thank you, Lord, for convicting them to bring me, because they know I would be a blessing. Okay, continue. I will say this. I talk to senior pastors and I talk to youth pastors, and I see it from both vantage points. And one of the things that I see a lot is that I've come into green rooms and I've been invited to conferences and I've been invited to camps. And something that does disappoint me that I see is when a youth pastor tears down another senior pastor. Sometimes we do it by accident. Sometimes we do it maliciously. And we do it intentionally. But either way, when you do that, what you're doing is that you're painting your pastor in a bad light. I think as youth pastors, especially when you're getting to use your gift, I just want to encourage you to cover your pastor. When you get a chance to talk about your pastor, always talk about good things. Oh, Pastor so-and-so, he's so, and if you don't have a lot of good things, like they're really good at tying their shoe, I just want to love my pastor, man. My pastor taught me to tie my shoe. Hey, and I wouldn't be tying my shoe if it wasn't for my pastor. I wouldn't know how to read my Bible if it wasn't for my pastor. I wouldn't know how to lead like this if it wasn't for my pastor. I'm going to find a thing that my pastor does, and I'm going to speak highly. I'm going to share it. I'm going to honor him because that's what I'm called to do. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to uncover him. I'm not going to make it my job to create another narrative amongst the staff, amongst my leaders, amongst my volunteers, amongst my parents about the vision and the person of who my pastor is. I'm just not going to do that. That's not going to be the person that I am. I'm going to be the type of person that's going to build. I'm going to be the type of person that's going to lead. I'm going to be the type of person that's going to cover. I'm going to say that my pastor, maybe he made a mistake, but I'm going to cover it. Maybe you saw something that frustrated you, but you're not going to repeat it. And if it really gets to you, I just want to say this. If you experience something with your pastor and it really gets to you and you're like, man, it's hard for me to reconcile this. If it's hard for you to reconcile, don't repeat it. I want you to go meet with a superior about it. Maybe you have access to your senior pastor. Ask him. Maybe it's something you got to pray about. And I will say this, if you're going to ask, make sure you pray about it. Make sure it's worthy. One of the things I like to do, I remember I got this piece of advice when I was 17 years old for Pastor Jabin in a leadership teaching when I was an intern. I've never forgot it because it stuck with me all my life. Anything you're really frustrated about, don't make a decision for 30 days. Come back to it 30 days later. If you still feel the same, make that decision. Every time I've had to make a big decision, I give it the 30-day rule. For sure. For real. Before I quit, 30 days. Before I propose to Victoria, 30 days, Vic. I'm just joking. I didn't give it 30 days. I gave it 30 seconds. I knew I wanted to marry her, okay? But anytime I wanted to make a big decision, 30 days. I want to encourage any youth pastor. If you feel something in your heart, pray about it. Pray about it. Man, I saw this in my church. I saw this with my pastor. I saw this with my executive team. Pray about it. Come back to it in 30 days. And then after you come back to it in 30 days, talk to your spouse about it. If you aren't married, call a youth pastor or call someone that you trust and bounce it off of them. Someone not on the inside, but someone on the outside. Say, hey, man, I felt this. This is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like this. What do you think? Get their opinion. If you still can't shake it, I think at this point, maybe you need to set up a meeting. Because obviously, whatever you're feeling has been affecting you for over a month. It's been affecting you for multiple weeks. And before multiple weeks becomes multiple years, invite a meeting. I've seen people get mad at something for years that could have been accomplished in one meeting, but they never allowed their superior to speak into the frustration. So I would encourage you to set up a meeting with your superior, with your pastor, with your leader, and just say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's frustrating. I haven't told anyone. I haven't gossiped about this. I'm not going to tell pastor down. This is just what I'm feeling. And because I want to be a person that honors and covers, I'm going to cover. And then they will give you clarity on whatever you're frustrated about. That may lead you to stay, which is awesome. That may lead you to leave, which is awesome because that's what God is calling you to do. Whatever it is, at least you know you did it the right way. I think what happens to a lot of youth pastors and leaders is that we get frustrated with our senior pastor. And that's why in the last episode, I was kind of talking about this because I see this happen a lot, where we get mad at the very people that brought us in. I want to tell you this. I had to tell myself this anytime I felt frustrated about my senior pastor. Oh my gosh, Tyshone, you get to preach every week if you wanted to. That is cool. Oh my God, Tyshone, you get to work out the words that God is giving you to young people. That's cool. For some of you, oh my gosh, Tyshone, you get to jump on a plane and travel to other youth ministries and speak because of what you're building under another man. That's cool. Your family is being taken care of. That's cool. And I remind myself reasons to honor and cover. I think sometimes what happens to ourselves, instead of reminding ourselves why we should honor and cover, we regurgitate a mistake and we get mad and we get vengeful and we end up sharing things. And when we share things, we get cursed. I just want to say it this way. Oftentimes, I've asked myself, would I want that done to me? Would I want that done to me? If I've always saw myself when I was a young man, and I'm still young, but I'm 29 years old. So a difference between being like 12, 13 to almost being 30. I remember when I was younger and the first call I felt was to one day be a senior pastor. I remember that. And so for many years, I've always saw myself as a senior pastor. And when I was a youth pastor, I had to ask myself, Tyshone, if you were a senior pastor and you had a young man on your staff like yourself, would you want him honoring you every chance he got, or would you want him tearing you down? I'll be quite honest. Boy, you better be honoring me. You better. I would hope you are. Because I'm blessing you, because I'm helping you, because God is doing a work through me seeing him use your gift in this house. I would hope you're honoring me. And man, if my youth pastor was really disappointed, I would hope that he would have a way of getting that frustration out in a way that was honoring to the system of the church. Maybe the honoring the way of the system of the church for you is directly talking to the senior pastor. Maybe you're the senior pastor's son and you can just pick up the phone and you can call him, you know. I know some kids that are senior pastor's sons. Charlie Hughes, shout out. If you're watching the episode, this is your shout out. If you're not watching the episode, you didn't even know that I was shouting you out, Charlie. Why aren't you watching the episode, okay? But maybe you're a person that you're in a big old mega church, right? And you're like, man, between me and my senior pastor is an army. I get it. But how about you meet with your superior? And if they feel it, they'll meet with their superior. And if they feel it, they'll meet with their superior. And before you know it, it may get to the leader of the machine. And then you can sit down and you can share your frustration, and they can give you clarity, and it can bring a level of peace, honor, and even synergy between between you and your senior pastor. What if the thing you're frustrated about is the thing that other people are frustrated about? And if you share it in the appropriate way, you can be a part of a positive change in your organization. See, I think what happens to a lot of us is that we don't even think that way. We are so prepared that what we feel is going to be wrong that we get quiet, and then we start gossiping, and then we get cursed, and then it's either you stay or you leave, and then you leave and you're frustrating and you rinse and you repeat the same thing everywhere you go. So I just want to encourage any youth pastor out here. I'm going to be honest. If you apply last week's teaching and you're committed to vision, and you apply this week's teaching of covering your pastor, no devil in hell can stop you. I'm not lying. Because now you've already are fixed in your perspective of the house you're a part of. Now you know what you're building, and now you know you're covering. Be a person that covers. I would want my leaders to cover my mistakes. I'm going to share the story, and then I'm going to conclude, and I pray that you subscribe and you share and you comment and you post on your Instagram. But I remember when I was a youth pastor for a while, I had some experience. It wasn't new anymore. This wasn't something that I didn't know how to do. I felt like I was getting to the point in my life that I was like, you know what? I know how to handle these teenagers. They're not going to destroy me this time. And these little, older teenagers and young adults, they're not going to stop me. I know how to do this. I was married. I was figuring some things out. And I said, you know what? The basics of the job wasn't as hard or wasn't as daunting as I thought it were before. So I was leading, and I remember one week I ended up meeting with the leader. This leader was so frustrated with me. Like, I couldn't believe how frustrated I made them. I don't know if you've had this meeting as a youth pastor or as a youth leader or next gen leader or student pastor or whatever you guys are called in your organization, but I think we've all had a leader that's been very, very frustrated by you, and you're like, whoa. Obviously, this is more of a misunderstanding than it is anything else. There's no way that they think I actually hate them. But if they do think I hate them, maybe there's something that I've done, or maybe there's something that I've maybe misrepresented myself, or they misunderstood something, or they misconstrued it something. But you can see that there's frustration with this leader. I remember this leader was very, very frustrated with me, and I ended up having a meeting with them, and I tried my best to diffuse the level of frustration. I got their perspective. I apologized, and initially, I just want to say this is that if you're leading anybody, if you just apologize, it disarms a lot of the frustration, because usually people come in ready to swing, but when you come in ready to say sorry, it just allows them to speak their actual frustration instead of speaking from a place of defense. And so I remember I told this leader, I said, hey, I'm so sorry that I did that. And we made amends, and I thought it was good, and it was good, right? And then a few weeks later, I remember hearing that they shared all their version of this story that was so out of whack. And I remember having to go back and tell a few people, meet with my superiors and let them know, like, hey, this is actually what happened. This is actually what took place. This is the actual story. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I misstepped, but this is what it was. And I remember being at home talking to my wife. It was a weekend. I should be doing weekend things. I should be going out. I should be having fun. But I'm at home disappointed and hurt because I had to disarm a level of gossip against my name that I knew it wasn't true. I just knew it wasn't true. And I thought that to myself, man, I never want to be that to my pastor. I never want to be that to my pastor. I never want to cause discord. I never want to uncover. I never want to create frustration in their home. Their life is already harder. They got to lead a church. They got to lead a staff. They got to lead a team. Tyshone, we're in episode 2. And the only thing I think you've been talking about is your senior pastor, because they're important. They're really, really important. And how you see them and how you honor them and how you cover them, it is directly correlated to your experience in that organization. The way you see your senior pastor is directly correlated to the elevation you experience in your job. Not the way you see other things, but the way you see your senior pastor. Are you going to cover or are you going to toe down? I made a decision that with every leader in my life, I'm going to walk backwards. I'm just going to walk backwards. I'm going to walk backwards and I ain't see nothing. I ain't see nothing. I ain't say nothing. And if it comes out, I mean, it came out. But when it comes out, it ain't coming out of this mouth. I just want to cover. I just want to cover every pastor I've been under. I want to cover every pastor I look up to. I would never want to uncover these pastors. Why would I want to do that? It's not my job to uncover. It's my job to cover. It's my job to honor. It's my job to build. And I think anytime you're in obedience, freedom and creativity and revelation flows. Anytime. When you are covering in the house and we are a covering of your pastor and you are giving your pastor grace because you realize this is new, this is hard territory, it's easy. Here's a way to cover your pastor. I want to encourage you. Number one, a way to cover your pastor and the way to make sure that you're showing your pastor grace is to pray for your pastor. To every youth pastor out there right now, youth pastor, young adult pastor, whatever pastor, I have a question. Do you pray for your pastor every day? If you don't, you should. Matter of fact, you should put the video down, you should put your phone down, and you should take a few seconds just to pray for your pastor. Pray that God would bless them. Pray that God would answer their frustrations. Pray that God would cover their family. Pray that God would move the church forward. Pray that God would keep them and would bless them. Pray that God would continue to move everything that's in their heart to fruition. Just pray for it. Pray for your pastor. Number two, speak highly of your pastor. If you're a youth pastor, you need to be posting about your senior pastor. I'm not going to get mad, Victoria. I'm not going to get mad, Daniel, but I'm just going to say this. Post about your senior pastor. How happy would you be if someone on your team posted about you? I remember this one day. I was at home and I was just having a hard day, y'all. It was one of those days. I don't know what it was. I just woke up defeated. Just one of those moods. I don't know what it was. And I was chilling. I remember I turned on Fortnite and I was losing. And when you lose in a video game and you're losing in life, that's a horrible recipe for disaster. And I walked over to Victoria. She was going to go hang out with our friend. And I was like, okay, now my wife doesn't want to hang out with me. I'm losing in a video game. I'm losing in life. I opened up my phone and one of my leaders posted about me. Pastor Tyshone. Every week he preaches. Oh, I feel so blessed. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord, because I was on the brink of giving it all up. And this little subtle encouragement from this leader that works at a coffee shop, man, it made my whole day. And I thought to myself, someone on my team posted about me. Let me go ahead and post about my pastor. Whether he likes it or not, I don't care. I hope he sees it because when he comes across it, he's not going to be mad. You know, I want to post about my pastor. I want to post about what they're doing. I want to post about who they mean to me. I want to encourage you. Pray for your pastor and post about your pastor. Number three, cover your pastor. If you've seen something that's brought frustration to you, it's not your job to bring that frustration to others. I'm going to say that one more time. If you've seen something that's made you frustrated, it is not your job to go tell the other staff members, I'm going to tell you what pastor did and I feel this way. Don't you feel about him? You sound and you act and you're looking like a demon. I'm not going to look at the camera, but you're acting like a demon if you're doing that. Don't do that. Cover your pastor. Speak highly of the pastor. Instead of going in the offices and cubicles and to other staff members talking about what you saw that you hate, how about you sneak into the offices and go into the cubicles and talk to the senior pastors and talk to the other staff members about the things that you saw that they didn't know about. Hey, you didn't know this, but Pastor so-and-so blessed so-and-so. Did you hear about that? Did you hear how he was so kind? Did you hear about how he showed mercy? Did you hear about that creative thing that he's working on? Isn't that so cool to see what God is doing in his family? How about you be a chief encouraging officer of your senior pastor? I think that would be a blessing. I'm telling you, when you make your job right now you know your job as a youth pastor. Between these two episodes, you can unsubscribe. You can. Now you got it. Now you just go, you leave. It's been good. I got nothing else to say. But I'm being serious. Between being committed to the vision of the house, and listen, if you don't like the vision of the house and you don't like the senior pastor, that tells you everything you need to know. Leave honorably. Leave honorably. I've left honorably in many places. Hey, I just feel like God was doing a different thing. Nothing against what God is doing. I just feel like what he's doing in you is different than what he's doing in me. And if I try to stay in alignment out of frustration because my assignment can be filled, oh my God, I'm going to create more toxicity amongst everybody. And because I know that, let me just leave honorably. But if you commit to say, you know what, I like the vision of this house. I like the values of this house. And every pastor has a part that I don't like, and I'm going to cover it. As a matter of fact, let me just say this. You have a part that leaders don't like, and people cover it. They cover it. They cover your mishaps. They cover your misfortunes, and it's your job, especially if you're paid. If you're paid and you talking against your pastor, how about you just turn in your resignation? Because you're not even working for the man that you said you were working for. Now you're not even working for the girl that you're claiming that you're working for, because if you're going to tear him down, you shouldn't take a paycheck from him. I know that's a hard way to end a podcast, but that's how I'm going to end it. So I want to encourage you to subscribe, comment, and like. Again, this is Youth Ministry with Tyshone Roland, and I will see you next week.